Don't jump. Those were the first words Marcus Carter forced out into the storm, his arms straining as he clung to the icy wrist of a stranger who'd already decided her story was over. It was midnight on the Brooklyn Bridge, rain slicing sideways, his 2-year-old son pressed against his chest, and still Marcus wouldn't let go. The girl's name was Ava, though he didn't know it yet, only that she was trembling, barefoot, ready to fall into the East River. And for one wild moment, everything hung there, her life, his balance, his child's safety, until raw instinct won and he hauled her back across the rail. That night should have ended with two people vanishing into their separate storms, but fate doesn't always follow neat exits. Marcus, a single dad who'd buried his wife in a fire years earlier, was no hero, just a man who carried drywall during the day, told bedtime stories at night, and counted loose coins to keep the heater running. Yet somehow he became the reason Ava didn't disappear into the dark. She told him she'd lost everything. He told her he knew that hollow, that he'd felt it when his wife was taken in smoke and flames. The difference, he said, was that his son had kept him anchored, and maybe she could find her own reason to stay. You could almost hear the disbelief in her laugh, but she stayed. Marcus took her to Joe Miller's place, a retired EMT with a warm lamp, chipped mugs, and a quiet kind of kindness. It was in that room, with towels draped around shoulders and chamomile hissing from a kettle, that Ava saw a glimpse of something she'd been starved of. Not perfection, not money, but presence. Marcus told her he wasn't always strong, that some nights guilt sat in his chest like stone. Ava, in turn, confessed she'd grown up under the shadow of Henry Whitmore, a father who measured love in utility and control. She'd been pushed into an arranged engagement, her dreams of painting dismissed as childish. And when she finally ran, she ran straight toward the bridge. But that night, she hadn't been invisible. Marcus had seen her. What followed wasn't some tidy romance. It was a messy weaving of two broken lives around a toddler who somehow knew how to give warmth even when he barely had enough himself. Eli offered Ava his scarf, his smile, his tiny hand, and she began to breathe again. Days turned to weeks. Ava tried working, Marcus kept grinding through jobs, Joe showed up with his old man toolbox. For a while, life was just survival patched together. Then came the accident. Marcus fell from scaffolding, cracked ribs, broken wrist, body bruised but not beaten. And when he woke in a sterile white room, Ava was there with blue hydrangeas, the same color as the day she had chosen not to die. That's when she told him the truth. Her full name, Ava Whitmore, daughter of Henry Whitmore, a man whose name could buy skyscrapers but couldn't buy love. If this were a fairy tale, maybe Henry would have embraced them. Instead, he sent lawyers, tabloids, smear pieces. Ava was dragged back to the penthouse, locked behind doors that smelled of legacy and suffocation. But one night she broke free, storm pounding like a drum, and returned to Marcus's door. No speeches, just the words, "If you still want me here, I'm back." They built something small, fragile, but theirs. A cafe in Brooklyn called Second Chances. Marcus stripped pallets for a bar. Ava painted walls in storm gray and honey brown. Eli drew a sign with crayon bridges. Joe wired outlets. Customers came, first out of curiosity, then because the place smelled of cinnamon waffles and survival. People shared their stories in Thursday night circles. Panic attacks, bank notices, survivor's guilt. And Ava told them about the night she almost let go, and the stranger who reminded her she didn't have to. There were twists, of course. Henry showed up, not to scold but to slip an anonymous check into the tip jar, for her colors, signed only with an H. Marcus's past resurfaced in smear blogs, Ava's name plastered across tabloids, but they chose transparency, posting receipts on the cafe wall so neighbors could see where every dollar went. The cafe became more than caffeine. It became a lantern in the storm, a place where people could sit, breathe, and remember they weren't alone. Over time, Ava and Marcus married, barefoot under the Brooklyn Bridge at 3:12 p.m., the exact hour she'd once come back. Eli carried the rings with solemn little hands. Joe cried like an old fool, and the minister told them bridges weren't just steel and rivets, but places where endings could become beginnings. Even Henry showed up, not as a tycoon, but as a father fumbling with the language of staying. He gave Eli a children's book called Second Chances with three figures holding hands on the cover. No grand apology, just presence. And sometimes that's all you need. Of course, life after vows wasn't magical. The friars smoked one morning and Marcus froze, dragged back to the night of the fire, until he steadied himself and reminded Ava that fear can be handled, not erased. A boy named Noah stumbled in one evening, eyes red, hands shaking, whispering about ledges he couldn't leave. They stayed with him, just as Marcus had once stayed with Ava, until professionals arrived. He lived, and weeks later, he wrote on the cafe's wall, "Thank you for not letting go of me again." A year passed. They started a lantern walk across the bridge, each person carrying a slip of wood with their reason to stay. Ava's said because of bridges. Marcus's said because of Eli. Noah's said because I want to see this autumn. Even Henry walked quietly, sleeves rolled. No entourage, leaving only an envelope with silent recognition. And through it all, the cafe kept its creed simple. Don't let go. Stay. You can call it survival, love, community, whatever name fits. But in a city where storms can strip you raw, sometimes the bravest act isn't leaping into the unknown. It's choosing to stay, to open the door again tomorrow, to carry someone's hand one more inch back from the edge. So I'll leave you with this. Do you believe every one of us deserves a second chance? That no matter how close someone comes to the edge, there's still a bridge waiting to carry them back? Drop your thoughts below. I want to know if you'd have let go, or if you'd have stayed. The morning after their quiet wedding under the Brooklyn Bridge, you'd think the world would slow down just to let them savor it. But no, life doesn't care if you just made vows. The coffee grinder jammed, Eli spilled milk on his new apron, and the first customer of the day was a nurse who wanted 2 shots of espresso and the biggest cinnamon waffle you've got. Marcus grinned, swapping out the fire extinguisher, habit from a life that wouldn't let him forget, and Ava just laughed, tying Eli's apron for the second time before noon. Spilling was allowed here. Messes, mistakes, starting over. They were practically written into the walls, but not every day felt easy. Sometimes, the past still crept in like cold wine through an old window. One Tuesday, Ava left the fryer on, distracted by a customer asking about the Thursday circle. Suddenly, a burnt smell curled through the cafe, sharp and metallic. Marcus's whole body tensed, memories of fire surging back, panic nearly paralyzing him. But he remembered what he'd learned, the 4-in, 4-hold, 4-out breath. He called out calm orders, shut off the gas, covered the pan. When the smoke thinned, he looked at Ava, who stood pale against the counter, and just said, "It happened. We handled it. It isn't that night." She nodded, eyes shining with tears and gratitude. Healing's never linear, but here, no one healed alone, and it wasn't just the 3 of them anymore. The Thursday circles kept growing. Sometimes it was quiet, a college student whispering about panic attacks, a widower showing up just to listen. Sometimes, stories tumbled out fast, bank notices, lost jobs, hard things said by people who were supposed to love you. Marcus talked about dignity, about envelopes with $12.35, about keeping your back straight for your child, even on weeks when the world seemed to say you were worth less. Ava talked about boundaries, how sometimes loving people meant not letting them cross certain lines, even if they were family. Twist of fate. One night, a journalist stopped by, expecting to write another broken heiress, working-class hero tabloid piece. Instead, she found receipts on the wall, therapy vouchers, a paywat in jar always a little heavier than expected. She came back, again and again. Her article, when it finally dropped, wasn't flashy, it was honest. A place that practiced staying, she wrote. Not charity, not spectacle, just the radical act of showing up. Business picked up, but it wasn't about the money. It was the way people sat longer, listened deeper, maybe even laughed a little easier. They left behind notes on the "I stay because bored, because my daughter needs me, because of Thursday soup, because someone smiled at me on the bridge." Even Henry, Ava's father, learned to walk in quietly, leaving envelopes with green checks or audit records, not as a challenge, but as a small sign of trust. Sometimes he'd watch Eli draw, sleeves rolled, the hard lines in his face softened by something that looked a lot like humility. But the world doesn't stop testing you just because you've built a little piece. One evening, a young man named Noah left a rushed note on the letters never sent wall. Sorry, I thought I was stronger. Don't let go of anyone else the way you didn't let go of me. N. Ava spotted it, heart thumping. Marcus was already calling Noah's number, Joe dialing the crisis hotline. It was raining, just like the night Marcus had pulled Ava back. They found Noah on the bridge, barely hanging on. No heroics, just words. Just presence. Ava set a thermos on the ground. Marcus asked for 10 minutes. Noah cried, shoulders shaking, but he stayed. Bridge patrol took him in, wrapped in a silver blanket. He came back a week later for Thursday Circle. Didn't speak at first, but he sat close, and that was enough. They kept adding rituals. Lantern walks on stormy nights. Just a few folks, flashlights, thermoses, and a promise that no one needed to stand alone on a ledge. They posted every expense on the wall. When an inspector flagged a frayed wire, Marcus shut down the power. Joe fixed it in front of everyone. The place built its reputation on honesty, not polish. Even the critics got bored. You want scandal? You won't find it here. Just small kindnesses and stubborn people refusing to quit. Anniversaries weren't marked by fancy parties, but by slow walks up the bridge. People carried slips of wood with their reason to stay. For the autumn I haven't lived yet. For a promise. For a song the bridge might sing someday. Henry, never comfortable in crowds, would sometimes walk the edge of the group, a quiet presence, learning by watching. Sometimes the past still pressed in. An old news article about Marcus resurfaced, or Ava would find herself shaking when a new urgent email came from her father's lawyer. But the difference now was she wasn't alone. When fear showed up, someone was there to name it, to make tea, to remind her that boundaries weren't just for keeping pain out, but for letting love in the right way. On quiet nights, after Eli had fallen asleep, Marcus would write letters to Sarah, his late wife, slipping them into the letters never sent corner. They weren't goodbyes, just updates. I didn't let go. There's more room in my life now. More light. Ava wrote, too, to her father, sometimes leaving the note unsigned, just to practice speaking honestly. Healing didn't mean forgetting or fixing everything. It meant building a life big enough for all the messy, beautiful parts to breathe. Second chances became more than a cafe. It was a refuge. A place to practice staying together. A place where don't let go was more than a phrase. It was a habit, a creed. On nights when the rain hit the bridge hard, the lights inside glowed even warmer. Sometimes you could see them through the window. Ava tracing a chalk heart on the wall, Marcus reading aloud while Eli colored, Joe wiping down counters, Henry leaning in the doorway, face soft with pride and regret in equal measure. One story here had a perfect ending. But every week, the board filled up again. I stay because. The reasons changed, but the heart stayed the same. Because of love. Because of hope. Because of people who refuse to let go, even on the hardest nights. And maybe, just maybe, that's what real happy endings look like. No fanfare. Just the quiet courage to show up for one more day. For yourself, and for the ones you've chosen to stay for. So, now it's your turn. What's your reason to stay? What do you believe about second chances, about community, about the stories we tell to keep each other going? Drop your thoughts below, share this story if it moved you, and don't forget to subscribe. After all, you never know who might need a little light the next time the night gets stormy.